This video will cover the basic functionality of the ZStartup Master plugin for ZBrush 4R8. So the ZStartup Master plugin will allow you to generate a custom default ZScript. So when ZBrush launches, it will load in project files, the brush you had saved, or other various options. So as an example of how ZBrush starts without using ZStartup Master, just come over here and just double click the icon. When ZBrush launches, it loads like this. So you can see I have Lightbox here, so I can press comma to close it on my keyboard. And let's say I want to get in and start sculpting. So I can come over here and say select a tool in the tool palette, draw it out, and then go into edit mode, and then maybe I want to change my matte cap to matte cap gray. So every time ZBrush launches, you may be going through these steps, where you load in a tool file, change your matte cap, select your brush, and then you can get into sculpting. After you have the ZStartup Master plugin installed, you can now automate these processes on ZBrush Start. So if I navigate up to the Z plugin tab here and open this up, you can see down at the bottom here, we have ZStartup Master. And in here, you have a bunch of different options you can choose from that are going to become active when ZBrush loads. So you have things like store the current tool, store the material, start in edit mode, store your current brush, enable backface masking, disable the dynamic brush size, activate local symmetry, rotate on Y, I'll turn the align cursor off, enable dynamic solo, close lightbox automatically, store ZApplink views, disable the spotlight projection, store spotlight images, and also activate live boolean. So by just coming through here and clicking these, you can now tailor your ZBrush Start to your liking. So as an example here, let's say I want to start with this scene. So every time ZBrush launches, I want to have the poly mesh 3D star visible on my screen. I want to be in matte cap gray, and then let's say I want to have the clay build-up brush selected. So I can go to the Z plugin tab again, and now I can just turn on some of these functions. So I want to store the current tool, which will store this poly mesh 3D star here. And with this, we'll also store the material, which is that matte cap gray, and it's going to start in edit mode. Now with this, I also want to store the brush. So I'm going to activate store current brush. And then I want to make sure that lightbox is closed on start. So I'm going to turn on lightbox close. And now I can come down to the bottom here and click install custom startup. So when you click this button, it's going to back up the current default ZScript on your system and then create a new one. And when ZBrush launches, it will look at this new default ZScript and load these files and options automatically. So by just clicking install custom startup, you'll get a pop-up just telling you that this has been installed. And now we can simply restart ZBrush. Now when ZBrush launches this time, you'll see that it's come back to the same settings I had. So I have the polymesh 3D star here loaded in, I have the clay build-up brush selected, and lightbox closed automatically. So now I can get right in and start sculpting. Now any project or tool will work with ZStartup Master. So let's say I always want Earthquake to load in. So I'm going to hit comma on my keyboard to open up Lightbox here. I'm going to go to the Demo Projects folder, and then I'm going to find Earthquake, and now double click to load him in. So now with Earthquake on the screen here, let's add some other options to our startup. So we have the clay build-up brush selected. Let's say we wanted to start with polyframes on, so I can turn my polyframes on here. And let's say we want to store some ZApplink views as well. So go to the document panel here and open this up, and go to ZApplink properties. I can set a front and a back view here, and then I can rotate them to the side, maybe set right and left. And then let's store two custom views. So I can zoom into his head here. And now go to document again and store one custom view. And then let's store one more, maybe zooming into his fist here. And store that one. So now I have some views stored, so I can click on these to go back to those views inside of ZBrush here. And you can see even the custom views are now respected. And let's say I also want to load some textures into Spotlight. So I'm going to go to the texture palette here. Let's select this texture row 1 and then click add to Spotlight. This will now load into Spotlight here. So I comma on my keyboard and change the opacity on this, scale it down some, maybe place it up in the corner here. Then click Z to get out of there. So let's say I want to use this as a reference image. I'm going to go to the brush palette over here. I'm going to go to samples. I'm going to turn off spotlight projection as well. So now I have Earthquake, I have a bunch of views stored for them, and I have some images that I've loaded into Spotlight that I want to use as reference. So now let's say I want to have what I see on screen here loaded when ZBrush starts. So I'm going to go back to the Z plugin tab here, go to the ZStartup Master. I'm going to first uninstall my existing startup by just clicking this button here. So I've just uninstalled the script that I currently set. Now I can go back in here and now set my options again. So I want to store my current tool, store the material, start in edit mode, store my current brush. I then want to store my ZApplink views, so the views that I set up for Earthquake here. I also want to store my spotlight images and also disable the spotlight projection. So now I have all these different options set, and now I can simply click Install Custom Startup, and now it's going to install this as my startup. So now if I restart ZBrush again, you'll see that I am returned back to where I was. So I have Earthquake, he's loaded in, he has his polyframes active. I have Spotlight loaded with that reference image. If I go to Document and then open up ZApplink Properties, you can see I have those custom views still saved. So I come through here and click Front to get to these different views on my mesh, and even the custom ones, which are on his head and his hand, are now loaded in. And if I go to the brush palette here and go to Samples, you can see that the Spotlight projection has also been disabled. So now I can use this as my startup file. So every time I launch ZBrush, this is what will load in, and then I can get right back into sculpting on my meshes. So once again, if you have ZStartup Master installed, it'll be located under the Z Plugin tab here, and then under the ZStartup Master area. In here, you can come through and select which options you want to enable. As you hover over each of these buttons, you'll also get a description of what processes will be turned on or off. And then you just simply select which ones you want active, and then click this Install Custom Startup. And then the next time you start ZBrush, these options will become enabled automatically. So that is it for this plugin. Happy ZBrushing.